Tonight, we begin with a development that U.S. officials, policy analysts, and retirement advocates had feared, warned about, and quietly prepared for. A move that unfolded not over months of quiet negotiation, but in a single congressional session. A single session that could reduce monthly benefits for millions of Americans. A single session that could permanently alter the retirement security of every worker over 50. A single session that could reshape the financial foundation that 67 million retirees depend on every single month. What the Senate did this week crossed a line that retirement advocates had hoped would hold. And when that line broke, retirees across this country did not hesitate. They responded with outrage, with urgency, and with a demand for answers. For years now, there had been signals, not official legislation, not formal announcements, just signals, that Congress was preparing something unprecedented for Social Security. The Senate has been financially cautious, yes, but they have been deliberate in that caution. Their moves have followed a certain pattern, a rhythm, almost a predictability. But what set off alarm bells in Washington policy circles this spring was that the usual deliberation went silent. Experts who monitor Social Security legislation know the indicators. The quiet committee hearings with no public notice, the budget reconciliation language buried in 400-page bills, the sudden scheduling of closed-door briefings with actuaries, the sudden departure of key Social Security Administration staff. All of that went quiet, and whenever Congress goes quiet on Social Security, it means something is about to get very loud for retirees. Early this spring, policy watchdog groups detected what they described as a sweeping legislative package, including proposed benefit calculation changes that had not been seriously advanced in over 2 decades. These are the kinds of structural reforms that Congress only moves forward when they are signaling something very specific. Benefit reductions disguised as adjustments, eligibility age increases framed as modernization, or cost of living formula changes dressed up as fiscal responsibility. Retirement advocates didn't know which category this fell into, or whether it fell into all three at once. But what they did know was that the Senate was changing its posture on Social Security. And when a legislative body shifts its posture on the most sacred retirement program in American history, even by a small measure, every retiree in this country pays attention. The warning issued by the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office this month was not normal. It was not routine. It was not symbolic. It was urgent. Report after report described the Senate's proposed changes as far-reaching, financially consequential, and perhaps most importantly, deliberately obscured from the public eye. But legislative maneuvering only works if the public hesitates. Retirees and their advocates did not. In fact, the public response has been among the most organized and forceful we've seen in a generation. Here's what we know. Within days of the bill's details leaking, advocacy groups filed formal challenges with key Senate committees. These weren't the usual form letters. These were coordinated legal and legislative strategies, pressure campaigns that retiree groups only deploy when they are preparing to fight a high-stakes battle all the way to the Senate floor. Tonight, sources inside Capitol Hill confirmed that the Senate package contains at minimum 4 significant changes to Social Security that every retiree must understand immediately. First, a proposed adjustment to the full retirement age. The new proposal would push the full retirement age from 67 to as high as 69 for workers currently under 55. That means younger workers who have been paying into the system for decades would receive less time to collect the full benefit they were promised. Second, a change to the COLA formula. The Consumer Price Index used to calculate cost of living adjustments would shift from CPIW to what's called the chained CPI, a formula that typically produces smaller annual increases, effectively cutting the purchasing power of your benefit every single year. Third, means testing. For the first time in the program's history, certain senators are pushing to reduce or eliminate Social Security benefits for retirees whose total retirement income, including pensions and investment accounts, exceeds a specific threshold. Fourth, a change to spousal and survivor benefits that would reduce the percentage a widow or widower could claim after the death of a higher-earning spouse. They didn't target one benefit. They targeted all 4 pillars at once. This is what made the CBO's warning so urgent. The Senate's package wasn't just symbolic, it was actionable. It represented the kind of structural shift that could permanently reduce lifetime benefits by tens of thousands of dollars for the average retiree if left unchecked. And here's where the story becomes even more critical for you to understand. Policy analysts now believe that the Senate's latest package was designed to test the political will of the American retirement community after years of legislative gridlock and budget pressure. Congress wanted to see whether retirees would accept gradual erosion without resistance. But instead, the opposite happened. Advocacy organizations didn't go quietly. They mobilized at a scale so rapid, so coordinated, that even career Senate staffers noticed. You don't get Washington's attention easily. But this week, retirees did. An economist speaking with a major financial publication under anonymity described the Senate's strategy as salami slicing, a way to make each individual cut seem small enough to tolerate, while the cumulative effect over 20 years is devastating. But retirees and their advocates proved this week that they remain both vigilant and organized. Their responses were not only loud, they were targeted so precisely that specific senators have already begun walking back portions of the language. That matters because it shows the power of an informed, activated retirement community. It shows that retirees are not passive recipients of policy. They are active defenders of the system they built. As reports continued coming in throughout the week, we learned more about the scale of what's being proposed. The Senate Finance Committee advanced language that would freeze benefit increases for new retirees above certain income thresholds for up to 3 years. Budget analysts identified that the chained CPI adjustment alone would cost the average retiree nearly $1,400 per year within a decade. Separate provisions operating quietly in the reconciliation bill would reportedly restrict early claiming options used by millions of Americans managing chronic illness or disability. This wasn't just a budget tweak. This wasn't just a technical correction. This was a structural redesign. This was a generational transfer of financial risk from the government back onto the shoulders of retirees. And that transfer is the one thing Social Security's architects designed the program to prevent since Franklin Roosevelt signed it into law in 1935. Remember, proponents of these cuts thought the public wouldn't notice buried language. They thought retirees wouldn't understand the difference between CPIW and chained CPI. They thought the complexity of benefit formulas would shield these changes from public outrage. But tonight, the exact opposite is happening. Retirees are reading the fine print. Advocacy groups are translating the technical language into plain dollars and cents. And senators in swing states are receiving more constituent calls about Social Security this month than about any other issue. What makes this moment so urgent and so consequential is that the Senate's latest move happened at a time when Congress is under extraordinary budget pressure from multiple directions. Fiscal hawks want deep entitlement cuts to reduce the federal deficit. Defense advocates want increased military spending protected at all costs. Healthcare lobbyists want Medicare and Medicaid changes handled separately. And retiree advocates want Social Security declared completely off the table. Senate leadership is balancing these competing demands while simultaneously trying to pass a broader budget reconciliation package before the fall deadline. And when leaders in that position make sudden moves on politically sensitive programs, they're not doing it from strength. They're doing it from pressure. They're doing it from vulnerability. And that is precisely the moment when public engagement matters most. The AARP's formal statement, now distributed to every major media outlet in the country, was designed to signal that organized retirees are not willing to allow benefit reductions without a full public fight. Senior officials said plainly that the Senate's proposed changes were inconsistent with the fundamental promise of Social Security to America's working families. That is careful language for, we will oppose this at every stage, in every committee, and at the ballot box. You don't usually hear that tone from the nation's largest retiree organization unless something extremely serious is at stake. Meanwhile, retirees across the country addressed local town halls and congressional district offices in passionate personal terms this week. One retired school teacher from Ohio said, "I paid into this program for 38 years. It is not a handout. It is a contract." A 71-year-old veteran from Arizona said, "Every dollar they take from my COLA is a dollar taken from my medication budget. This is not abstract to me." And a widow from Florida said, My husband and I planned our entire retirement around these numbers. They do not get to change the rules after we already played the game. These are not rhetorical flourishes. These are statements from an electorate that understands just how high the stakes of the 2026 legislative calendar have become. Here's what makes the situation even more pressing for every person watching tonight. The Senate's package is not yet finalized. That means there is still time to act. Along with contacting your senator directly, experts recommend 3 immediate steps. Review your Social Security statement at ssa.gov to understand your current projected benefit under existing rules. Calculate the impact of a chain CPI adjustment on your specific monthly benefit over a 10 and 20-year horizon. Register your position with your senators through AARP, the National Committee to Preserve Social Security, or directly through senate.gov. All of this can be done before this bill moves to a full Senate vote, which analysts expect as early as late 2025. Analysts are now considering several possibilities for how this plays out. One is that public pressure forces the Senate to strip the most aggressive provisions before a floor vote. Another is that the package passes in a modified form, with some cuts delayed or phased in over a longer timeline to reduce political visibility. A third possibility, the one worrying retirement advocates the most, is that the Senate passes the full package as a budget necessity, betting that most Americans won't feel the full impact until years after the vote. But an informed public can take that last option off the table. They don't need to accept small adjustments in silence. They don't need to trust that complexity protects them. They don't need to wait for someone else to fight this battle. They can act now. What we're watching now is a test of political will. The Senate wants to see whether fiscal restructuring can happen quietly. Retirees want to show that no earned benefit is ever reduced without consequence. Congress wants to prevent a full-scale electoral backlash in 2026, and the retirement community wants to prevent a single dollar of earned benefits from being taken without a transparent, public, fully debated vote. Tonight, we've heard from policy analysts who are now monitoring committee markups in real time. They say several senators have already requested delayed votes to assess constituent response. They say the changed CPI provision is the most likely to be modified or removed under current pressure. And they say the Senate's decision to bundle these changes inside a broader reconciliation bill is likely part of a deliberate strategy intended to limit individual votes and reduce public accountability. But the retirement community is not standing down. In fact, advocacy engagement has accelerated dramatically in the past 10 days. Their response, organized, sustained, and legally sophisticated, sent a message to the Senate that no vote on Social Security happens in the shadows. And it sent a message to every retiree watching tonight that your benefit is worth fighting for. As the legislative calendar moves forward, we expect more details to emerge about exactly what the Senate hopes to achieve through this package. But what we do know is that public awareness right now is timely, critical, and powerful. It creates political accountability before a vote, not after. It gives retirees the opportunity to engage while the language is still being written. And it ensures that whatever passes, it passes with every American knowing exactly what was done and who voted for it. What happens next will depend on what the Senate does in the coming weeks. If they strip the most harmful provisions, this moment will be remembered as proof that an engaged public can protect earned benefits. If they push forward, retirees and their advocates have already shown they are organized, informed, and ready to respond at every level, in committee rooms, in town halls, and at the ballot box in November 2026. And tonight, for the first time in decades, Social Security's foundational structure appears to be genuinely at risk. Washington is moving fast. And when Washington moves fast on Social Security, it means they are counting on the public not keeping up. Because tonight, retirees are learning something that advocates have known for a long time. The system does not protect itself. Informed citizens protect the system. And silence is never neutral. It is always a vote for whatever those in power have already decided. This story is far from over. But tonight, one thing is clear. The changes being proposed are real, they are significant, and they will affect your monthly check. You have the power to influence the outcome, but only if you act before the vote is called. And we will be here watching every committee hearing, every markup and every floor vote as the next phase of this fight unfolds.